Tonight we talk about Hadrian and Antinous, a love written in stone. You're drifting through the hush of midnight Rome. The marble glows under torchlight, the air thick with wine, wax, and empire. The world is big, loud, and full of people pretending to be gods. And yet, at the very center of it all, there's one man, Hadrian, who is everything except the thing that keeps mortals sane. Affection that isn't transactional. You can almost hear him pacing his palace, the creak of sandals echoing off domes built to outlast time. You probably won't survive this era. To be fair, Roman plumbing alone would take you out, but you can still step into his world for a while. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're listening from and what time it is over there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing beside the emperor of nearly everything, Hadrian, who rules not just Rome but also the restless horizon. He's no Julius Caesar clone. This one prefers books, architecture, and travel. He sketches domes on scraps of parchment, whispers to stonemasons, and hums to himself while inspecting aqueducts. His empire is running smoother than a marble floor after an oil spill, but he's restless. He's conquered the world. Now he wants to understand it. Hadrian's world is drenched in art and philosophy. Greek tutors still echo in the corridors, quoting Plato like sports commentary. He's fascinated by beauty in the abstract, by the notion that the divine can slip into mortal form. Historians still argue whether he was a philosopher king or just a perfectionist with imperial resources. But either way, you can sense the melancholy beneath his triumph. Picture him now, silver-streaked hair, thick beard, a scandalous fashion imported from Greece, and eyes that don't blink much. His soldiers adore him, his architects fear him, and his poets owe him rent. Yet every triumph seems to echo hollowly in the marble. Rome itself feels too symmetrical, too finished. Maybe that's why he travels to find something unscripted. In your mind's ear, you hear the rustle of maps, the snap of scrolls as aides announce itineraries: Athens, Antioch, Alexandria. You catch a glimpse of him sketching an arch while half listening to senators debate taxation. The emperor's heart, it turns out, beats to the rhythm of curiosity. One mainstream fact here: Hadrian really did spend more time traveling his empire than any Roman ruler before him, nearly half his reign on the road. It's a logistical nightmare that somehow worked. Somewhere along these journeys between temples and border walls, his path will cross with a youth who changes everything. But for now, it's just you and the emperor beneath a waning moon, the air humming with that faint Roman mix of incense and ambition. You can feel history poised on the edge of a heartbeat, waiting for love to interrupt conquest. You're in Bithynia now, a green fold of Asia Minor, where the air tastes faintly of figs and sea salt. The empire stretches its fingers here too, but the land still hums with its own rhythm, half Greek, half Anatolian. And it's here, amid whitewashed courtyards and schoolyards echoing with laughter, that you first glimpse Antinous. He's not royal, not wealthy, not even especially loud, just a quiet boy whose stillness draws attention more surely than any speech could. You can almost see him now, dark curls falling over his forehead, a gaze so steady it feels like moonlight caught in water. Hadrian meets him during one of his provincial tours, officially to inspect administration, unofficially to escape boredom. One mainstream fact: the year is likely around 123 CE, and Hadrian is indeed in Bithynia, where historical sources like Cassius Dio hint he first noticed the boy. Historians still argue whether Antinous was a servant, a student, or simply part of a youth delegation meant to honor the emperor. The records are fuzzy, as if history itself blushed and looked away. You follow them through a bustling courtyard, Hadrian in his travel cloak, dusty from inspection, Antinous in simple linen, offering a garland with hands to steady for someone so young. Their eyes meet. You feel it, a moment that somehow rewires the air. The emperor, accustomed to senators fawning and generals boasting, finds something entirely new, unaffected grace. He smiles, not the rehearsed imperial smile for coins and statues, but something unguarded. From that encounter, the boy's life veers like a bird startled mid-flight. He's taken into Hadrian's educational orbit, officially as a page, unofficially as a student of the emperor's many curiosities: geometry, poetry, the art of riding through storms without flinching. In the evenings, under the glow of oil lamps, you can almost hear Hadrian reciting lines from Homer, testing whether the boy follows the rhythm. Antinous listens, learns, rarely speaks, and Hadrian, used to commanding armies, finds himself waiting for a nod of approval from someone who should be in awe of him. A fringe tidbit whispers through time. Some ancient astrologers claimed Hadrian ordered a chart drawn the very night they met, certain the stars had aligned. Whether that's true or not, you can sense the emperor's obsession with omens. Every flicker of lamplight, every strange bird call, he reads them all as confirmation that this meeting was fated. You trail them through palace corridors, through gardens perfumed with myrtle and laurel. Hadrian teaches Antinous to ride, to hunt, to read Greek so fluidly it sounds like singing. The relationship begins as mentorship, but you can feel the current deepening. A slow pull toward something neither empire nor etiquette can name, and yet, as always in Rome, power wraps even affection in ceremony. Whispers start the court gossips, the poets speculate, the moralists sharpen their styluses. But for now, in the dusk of Bithynia, none of that exists. There's only an emperor finding, for the first time, someone whose silence feels like companionship. The empire can wait. Love has entered the stage. Quietly, irrevocably, you're back in Rome now. The Tiber gleaming like molten bronze under the afternoon haze. The city hums, vendors shouting, sandals slapping cobblestones, marble facades soaking in sunlight like lazy cats. Hadrian has brought Antinous into this colossal hive. Officially as a member of his scholarly retinue. Unofficially, everyone knows he's something rarer. You can feel it in the hush that follows when they walk by. An emperor and his favorite. Teacher and pupil, ruler and mirror. Their days blend into ritual. Mornings spent in study, afternoons in the training grounds, evenings drifting through Hadrian's private gardens where the statues themselves seem to listen. The emperor teaches Antinous the geometry of empire, how roads are laid out, how aqueducts rise and curve to gravity's rhythm. But between those lessons, he teaches gentler things, how to quote a line of Sophocles at the perfect moment, how to taste wine like a philosopher instead of a soldier. You watch them side by side under the plane trees, Hadrian sketching another dome, Antinous passing him fresh parchment. One mainstream historical fact: Hadrian truly built a massive villa. Outside Rome, Villa Adriana at Tivoli, an architectural experiment blending Greek, Egyptian, and Roman designs. It's said he used it as both a retreat and a museum of memories. Historians still argue whether Antinous lived there full time, but the layout itself, gardens, pools, replicas of faraway temples, feels like a mind trying to rebuild the world it adores. There's humor in the domestic moments, too. You catch Hadrian lecturing on Plato while trying to convince Antinous to eat olives. They build character, he insists. The boy wrinkles his nose. Another time, Hadrian attempts to demonstrate a wrestling move from his youth, only to twist his back and declare philosophy superior to sport. Even emperors have limits. Yet beneath the laughter, the bond tightens. They begin traveling together more openly. At ceremonies, Antinous stands a respectful step behind. At private banquets, a breath closer. Roman high society pretends not to notice, but gossip travels faster than any legion. Some senators whisper of impropriety, others of divine destiny. A curious tidbit from the margins of history: Hadrian was a member of the Eleusinian Mysteries, secret Greek rites devoted to rebirth. Some scholars suggest he may have initiated Antinous as well. The idea of spiritual transformation would have appealed to both a love justified not by desire, but by transcendence. You see it in how they look at each other when no one's watching. For Hadrian, the boy becomes both muse and mirror, youth's reflection in marble already cracking. For Antinous, the emperor becomes the world's axis, terrifying, tender, inevitable. You feel the imbalance, one man's empire, another's surrender, but also something oddly equalizing, as if affection itself were a rebellion against power. As night falls over Tivoli, the fountains whisper, the moon turns the marble silver, and the emperor laughs softly at something Antinous says, something history never wrote down. You realize that in this quiet space between rule and devotion, Rome's mightiest man has finally found his peace. For now, you're on the road again, dust in your sandals, banners snapping in the wind. Hadrian's wanderlust hasn't eased. If anything, it burns brighter. He drags the empire's bureaucracy along like a reluctant caravan, crossing mountains, deserts, and half the known world. Antinous rides beside him now, no longer the shy boy from Bithynia, but a poised companion, tanned from the sun and fluent in the quiet politics of proximity. You can feel their rhythm, Hadrian's mind forever strategizing, Antinous' calm gaze anchoring it all. Every stop brings ceremony, city gates festooned with garlands, local elites kneeling to present keys and speeches, endless processions that blend piety with performance. You stand among the crowds, watching the emperor accept tributes while his favorite lingers just behind, part ornament, part omen. The people notice, of course. In Antioch, merchants whisper. In Athens, poets murmur of a new Ganymede walking beside Zeus. The myths practically write themselves. One mainstream fact here: Hadrian's imperial tours were monumental in scope. He inspected every province, reformed administrations, and personally financed temples. Historians still argue whether his constant travel was governance, escapism, or both. What's clear is that wherever he went, Antinous was increasingly there too, his quiet presence recorded in inscriptions and local legends. You join them on a crisp morning near the Danube, where the mist smells of pine and iron. Hadrian discusses fortifications with his generals, tracing lines in the frost. Antinous listens, not to the strategy, but to Hadrian's tone. When the emperor's voice falters, the boy steps closer, no words, just steady presence. You realize this isn't flattery. It's fluency in the language of power's loneliness. Then there are the rituals, strange and sacred. At Eleusis in Greece, they kneel together in torchlight, reenacting the mysteries of Demeter and Persephone. Some claim Antinous was symbolically reborn that night. Others scoff, saying Hadrian merely wanted to drape philosophy over infatuation. Still, when you see them afterward, Hadrian's face luminous. Antinous serene, you suspect something profound happened. Something neither could name without breaking it. A fringe tidbit whispers through later texts. The emperor's astrologers warned him that the stars surrounding Antinous were heavy with sacrifice. Hadrian reportedly dismissed it with a smile. You file that away, uneasy. Their journey moves South Asia Minor, Syria, then to the edge of Egypt. You sense the story tightening like a drawn bow. Between ceremonies, they share small, unguarded moments, Antinous teasing Hadrian for humming during inspections, Hadrian gifting him a hunting spear carved with constellations. There's laughter, sandstorms, arguments about the right way to build an arch. Love, in other words, just with more marble involved. But underneath the rhythm of travel, there's a faint pulse of foreboding. Antinous grows quieter. Perhaps the constant scrutiny weighs on him, or perhaps he feels his reflection fading against the emperor's brilliance. The Nile is calling wide, glittering, endless. Soon, their journey will reach its most beautiful and terrible bend. For now, though, you ride behind them as the caravan crests a hill. Wind tugging your cloak, the empire stretching below like a living map. And you can't help thinking, no love this visible ever ends gently. The Nile stretches before you like a sheet of molten gold. You can hear the water lapping against the oars, the rhythmic creak of ropes, the murmur of priests chanting blessings as lotus petals drift across the surface. Hadrian and Antinous have entered Egypt, the empire's jewel, and its graveyard of secrets. The light here hits differently, harsher, holy, a kind of radiance that strips away pretense. You feel the heat pressing down like a hand, smell the mix of incense, sweat, and river mud. The imperial flotilla glides south toward Hermopolis. Officially, this is a tour of inspection. Unofficially, it's a pilgrimage. Hadrian has always been obsessed with Egyptian religion rebirth, the weighing of souls, the promise that love might defy time. The temples along the banks seem to nod as he passes, their hieroglyphs whispering that even emperors are clay in divine hands. Antinous, though, seems distant. You watch him leaning against the rail at night, face silvered by moonlight, eyes fixed on the current as if it's carrying his thoughts somewhere unreachable. The emperor notices. He tries to coax laughter with stories of past hunts, jokes about crocodiles with better manners than senators. Antinous smiles briefly, but it doesn't reach his eyes. One mainstream fact: Antinous died mysteriously in October of 130 CE, during Hadrian's Nile expedition. Historians still argue whether it was accident, suicide, or ritual sacrifice. The ancient sources contradict each other. One says he drowned. Another implies something darker, an offering for Hadrian's health or the gods' favor. The truth: drowned with him. You're on the deck that night when it happens. The moon, swollen and red, hovers over the water. There's shouting, then silence, a splash. The river ripples, swallowing its secret whole. You rush forward, but it's too late. The lotus petals scatter. The oars freeze mid-stroke. And Hadrian just stands there, his face unreadable. The emperor who built walls across continents can't stop the flood within his own chest. A fringe tidbit flickers through legend. Some priests later claimed they saw a star ignite above the river days after the drowning, declaring it the spirit of Antinous ascending. Others said Hadrian himself ordered that story spread, to anchor grief in something celestial. But as you look at him now, hands trembling, eyes hollow, you know this isn't politics. It's devastation raw enough to warp history. In the days that follow, the flotilla moves on. But the air aboard is different, thick, haunted. Hadrian refuses to speak of the details. He only orders a shrine built on the riverbank where the body was found. You can still smell the wet clay. See workers shaping the foundation as priests chant for a boy who became both memory and myth. The Nile flows on, as it always does. You stand at its edge, sand clinging to your sandals, and realize that an empire's most enduring monument won't be a wall or a dome, but a grief too deep to sink. The silence after Antinous' death feels heavier than the desert air itself. You follow Hadrian through the days that blur into ritual, his steps slow, his voice a shadow of command. The emperor of half the known world has been reduced to a man pacing the banks of the Nile, tracing his loss into the dust. It's said he didn't eat for days, barely spoke. You can almost hear the scraping of his sandals on the stone quay, the soft hiss of the river mocking his stillness. Then something shifts. You watch him straighten his back, eyes cold but alight with something fierce, purpose, maybe, or defiance. If the gods have taken Antinous, Hadrian will answer in kind. He will make the boy immortal, not with prayer, but with empire. One mainstream fact: Hadrian officially declared Antinous a god, divus Antinous, an act unprecedented for a non-imperial youth. Historians still argue whether this was grief, propaganda, or genuine belief. Whatever the motive, the result was extraordinary. Temples sprang up almost overnight. Coins bore his face. The cult of Antinous spread faster than any decree. You stand among the first worshippers at the riverside shrine. The air smells of resin and lotus. Flickering lamps paint Antinous' face, sculpted from marble so fine it almost breathes. The boy who drowned now presides as a god of youth, of beauty, of the quiet endurance of love. Hadrian watches the ceremony, jaw clenched, as priests chant his beloved's name into immortality. A fringe tidbit: some later followers treated Antinous as a form of Osiris, the god who died and rose again through the Nile cycle. The parallels were too perfect to ignore. Water, sacrifice, rebirth. Coins minted in Egypt even show Antinous crowned with lotus petals, his gaze turned heavenward. You imagine Hadrian approving every detail personally, ensuring that even death bent to his design. But grief is a tricky architect. It builds monuments and traps alike. As Hadrian sails back toward Alexandria, he orders more statues, hundreds of them, to be sent across the empire. No single face has ever been so reproduced in stone. The sculptors, sensing divine commission, carve Antinous as Apollo, Dionysus, Osiris, Hermes. Each iteration reimagines him. Yet none quite capture the softness of the boy who once leaned against the ship's rail. Rome predictably buzzes. Senators raise eyebrows. Philosophers debate whether divinity can be manufactured by decree. The public, however, adores it. Temples mean festivals, and festivals mean wine. Even the skeptics whisper Antinous' name at night, just in case. Hadrian retreats to solitude. You picture him sketching designs for new temples, each line an attempt to redraw the moment before the river claimed his joy. He orders a star chart of the constellation nearest the time of Antinous' death. Soon astronomers will name it Antinous as well, a cluster nestled beside Aquila. Love now hangs among the heavens. You realize that what Hadrian couldn't keep in flesh, he would preserve in permanence. The emperor has turned grief into theology, architecture, Astronomy a cosmic insurance policy against forgetting. The Nile still whispers behind you, but now it carries a new name in its current. One destined never to fade, Antinous, the god born of loss. You return to Rome, where marble gleams like frozen lightning and rumor moves faster than the Tiberias current. The city hasn't seen anything quite like this before, an emperor canonizing a drowned youth, filling temples and forums with his image. You can feel the tension crackle under the gilded ceilings. The Senate murmurs disapproval, but only in rooms small enough to feel safe. The common people, though they love it. A god of beauty who once walked among them, who wasn't born royal, who died young. That's the kind of divinity they understand. Hadrian's courtiers tread carefully. They watch him enter council chambers wearing a small amulet carved with Antinous' profile, the smooth marble worn shiny from his thumb. Every decree he signs feels faintly haunted, every triumphal feast punctuated by an empty seat at his right hand. The empire has acquired a new god, but it has also acquired an emperor transformed by mourning. One mainstream fact: Hadrian indeed ordered countless statues and altars of Antinous. Across the empire from Britannia to Asia Minor, his image became one of the most reproduced in Roman art. Historians still argue whether this was pure devotion or subtle politics, a unifying cult meant to weld provinces under shared emotion. Either way, it worked. The cult of Antinous spread with astonishing speed. You stand in the workshop of a sculptor in Athens. Shards of marble litter the floor like snow. The artisan squints at a bust, adjusts a chisel, and sighs. His face again? He mutters to his apprentice. Always the same boy. But when the emperor himself visits, eyes glinting like obsidian, no one dares complain. The chisel bites deeper. Love becomes legislation. A fringe tidbit: ancient sources claim some of Hadrian's political enemies mocked his obsession, calling him the widower of a statue. One satirist even drew a cartoon of the emperor kneeling before his own creation. Yet, curiously, those same critics later built small shrines to Antinous in private homes. Hypocrisy, Rome's favorite religion. Still, you sense the risk in this devotion. Deifying a commoner is one thing. Sustaining the illusion of divinity is another. Each temple, each sculpture, demands justification. Hadrian's architects whisper that the emperor's next project will outshine them all, a city built not for Rome, but for the memory of a single boy. At night, Hadrian walks the gardens of Tivoli again. You trail behind him, sandals crunching gravel. The air is cool. Statues line the path like frozen echoes. He pauses before one of Antinous as Dionysus ivy crowned, smiling faintly. They say marble lasts forever. He murmurs, half to himself. But I know better. It just forgets slower. You can feel the empire tilt slightly in that sentence. Rome was forged on conquest, yet here stands an emperor whose greatest monument is grief. The political machine grinds on, but its gears are greased with elegy. The Senate will forgive much if the aqueducts run and the legions stay paid. But love this public makes them uneasy. Still, Hadrian persists. He drafts plans, dispatches architects, and murmurs the name Antinous as though invoking a spell. Somewhere in the Egyptian desert, a city will rise where a boy once sank. Love is about to take form again, this time not as a statue, but as stone and streets, and the refusal to let the river win. The desert yawns open before you, vast and pale beneath a molten sky. You can taste dust on the back of your tongue, feel the heat shimmer above the sand like invisible fire. Here, on the Nile's eastern bank near the place where Antinous vanished, Hadrian has decided to build a city. Not a monument this time, a living place, pulsing with markets, theaters, temples. He names it Antinopolis, the city of Antinous. You stand with him at dawn as surveyors mark the ground. The emperor's eyes are red-rimmed but steady. If the gods demand a soul, he says quietly, then let them have a city, too. And with that, spades cut into sand, drums sound, and history begins to take shape. One mainstream fact: Hadrian really did found Antinopolis in 130 CE, near the site of Antinous' death. It was built in Greek style, with colonnaded streets and sanctuaries to both Egyptian and Greco-Roman gods. Historians still argue whether it was meant as a cult center, a political gesture, or a genuine act of mourning. What's certain is that it thrived for centuries. outliving the empire that birthed it. You walk its newborn streets in imagination blocks of pale limestone gleaming in the sun, the smell of wet plaster mingling with date palms. Artisans carve Antinous' face into lintels and fountains. Merchants hang garlands of lotus at every doorway. A temple rises at the city's heart, its friezes depicting the boy's transformation, mortal, drowned, reborn as divine. You notice something remarkable. There's joy here. Not solemn worship, but celebration. The citizens of Antinopolis laugh, trade, gossip, live. Love, ray-shaped as civic life, a fringe tidbit, centuries later. Early Christian chroniclers claimed miracles occurred here, healing springs, prophetic dreams, even visions of a luminous youth walking the streets at night. Whether invention or not, the city carried an energy that refused to die. Perhaps that was Hadrian's real magic. Grief turned self-sustaining. Still, the emperor can't hide his fatigue. You see him watching the builders from a shaded portico, sketching new plans for arches he'll never finish. The sun burns lines into his face. His heart, once volcanic, has cooled to embers. But there's pride, too. This isn't just memory, it's resurrection in brick and marble. Antinous, the god who drowned, now anchors trade routes and festivals. His name sits on official seals. Love has become administration. The locals tell stories that Hadrian visits the temple alone at night, leaving offerings of lotus and gold. They say he whispers to the statue, and sometimes the river breeze answers. You believe them. You've seen how grief rearranges the world. It doesn't fade. It colonizes. When evening falls, the desert exhales cool air. Torches flicker along the Nile front, their reflections trembling on the current. Somewhere, music rises, lyres, drums, laughter. The city that began as a heartbreak now pulses with life, its streets echoing with footsteps that never knew the boy whose name they bear. Hadrian stands at the balcony overlooking it all. His expression softens, almost peaceful. For the first time since the river took Antinous, he isn't chasing eternity. He's built it. And you, standing beside him in the starlight, understand, some loves don't die, they just learn architecture. You're in a sculptor's workshop now, somewhere in Athens, where dust hangs like holy smoke in the shafts of sunlight. The sound of chisels rings through the air, a soft, endless percussion of devotion. Blocks of marble line the walls, half-formed faces staring outward. And everywhere, that same face, Antinous, over and over again, young, idealized, serene. The boy who drowned has become the most recognizable visage in the Roman world. You trace your fingers across a freshly polished cheek, cool, impossibly smooth. The sculptor glances up, weary. They want him perfect, he says. Always perfect. But I saw him once before all this. He gestures toward the endless marble. He smiled with crooked teeth. Then he shrugs, returns to his work. The chisel strikes again, erasing imperfection. One mainstream fact: historians estimate more than 2,000 statues and busts of Antinous once existed, rivaling even the depictions of Augustus. No other mortal in antiquity was sculpted so often. Each region rendered him differently: Greek cities as a demigod, Egyptians as a Cyrus reborn, Romans as eternal youth. Historians still argue whether this was Hadrian's propaganda or genuine mass adoration. Perhaps both. You move through time and space as if walking a museum. In Delphi, Antinous stands draped in a chlamys, eyes cast heavenward. In Alexandria, he wears the lotus crown of rebirth. In Rome, his marble curls fall across his forehead just as they did the day he met the emperor in Bithynia. But look closer, each statue carries a tiny deviation, a hidden signature from its maker, a secret rebellion against uniformity, a sculptor's code, maybe, or a whisper of how art mourns differently than power. A fringe tidbit lingers in artistic circles. Some claim that Hadrian personally inspected every major statue before it left the workshop, running his hands over the stone as if confirming the boy still existed there. Others say he whispered private words to each finished piece, little messages no one else could hear. Whether superstition or not, you can imagine it, an emperor using art as seance. You watch artisans mix powdered gold into the wax they'll rub across the marble, giving each face a faint inner glow when candlelight hits. One pauses, leans close, and murmurs, "He's not really gone, is he?" You don't answer, because in this room, surrounded by silent witnesses, It's impossible to say where death ends and memory begins. Then you see one statue that stops you cold. Antinous as Hermes Psychopompos, guide of souls. It's smaller, subtler, his face serene but knowing. Maybe the sculptor understood something Hadrian couldn't. Love doesn't end. It just changes professions. As you step out into the Athenian twilight, statues line the streets awaiting transport, their blank eyes glowing faintly in the last light. Somewhere far away, Hadrian is aging, his beard streaked with white. His empire still vast but quieter now. Yet his greatest work continues. Chiseled by countless anonymous hands, love translated into permanence. Grief rendered in stone. You pause, imagining the emperor walking among these likenesses centuries later, whispering the same question that every artist, lover, and mourner eventually asks: if marble remembers, do we? You find yourself in the twilight of Hadrian's reign, when even emperors begin to count years like grains of sand slipping through their fingers. The beard once black as river ink is now threaded with silver, and the eyes that once surveyed continents have turned inward. He sits in his villa at Baiae, gazing out at the sea, the horizon melting into mist. Rome still obeys him, the legions still march, but his heart, you can tell, remains anchored somewhere on the Nile. The marble effigies of Antinous surround him. Some are gifts from cities, others his own commissions. Each one looks back at him with the same serene youth he no longer possesses. You can almost hear the quiet conversations between them, the emperor's sighs, the whisper of memory masquerading as prayer. One mainstream fact: Hadrian spent his final years ill, retreating from politics to his villas. He composed poetry about Antinous, though most of it was later lost. Historians still argue whether those verses were private laments or coded theology. But the few lines that survive ache with the loneliness of a man who tried to sculpt eternity and ended up carving his own absence. He keeps his empire running. Of course, he's still Hadrian. He approves a law here, orders a temple restored there. But you can feel the weariness, like the last light of a long festival. He wanders through his gardens, where every pool reflects not the sky, but Antinous' face. Even the fountains seem tuned to the rhythm of loss, a fringe tidbit. Centuries later, when Christian scribes catalogued the idols of the old gods, they recorded that the cult of Antinous still lingered quietly in back rooms, in household shrines, even as Rome converted. His image survived longer than many emperors. Love, it turns out, is stubborn in marble. You're with Hadrian now as night thickens. He leans on the balcony, looking at the constellations. Somewhere up there astronomers named it. During his lifetime glimmers the faint constellation Antinous, nestled beneath the eagle Aquila. The emperor murmurs a prayer in Greek, half invocation, half apology. The sea wind brushes against him like a familiar hand. You feel the story fold in on itself, time curving back toward that fateful river. He will die soon, and his ashes will join those of the rulers he once studied in marble. But Antinous' name will outlive them both. The statues will be buried, rediscovered, admired anew. Lovers centuries apart will stand before them and feel something ancient stir, something that defies chronology and reason. You, too, feel it now, the ache of beauty unmoored from time. And maybe that's the real empire Hadrian built, not Rome, not walls or domes, but the fragile dominion of memory. Love made visible, grief given architecture. The stones remember even when people forget. The waves sigh against the shore. The lamps flicker out. You close your eyes and imagine the boys' laughter echoing once more across the Nile, blending with the wind, the water, and the hush of the stars. So now, as the story settles and the empire sleeps, let your breathing slow with it. Picture the marble of Antinous glowing under a velvet sky, the statues softened by centuries of dust. Somewhere, a palm frond stirs, and a piece of broken column catches the moonlight just so, like a reminder that beauty, even fractured, still insists on being seen. Hadrian's voice fades. His empire dissolves into sand, yet the love he built endures in quiet places. Maybe in a museum corner where a fragment of Antinous' face still smiles. Maybe in the chill hush of an archive where his name rests on a clay fragment. Every generation rediscovers them, mistakes reverence for curiosity, and ends up whispering the same question: what if devotion could outlast death? The scholars can keep debating accident or sacrifice, politics or passion. You know better now. You've walked beside them on the Nile, felt the river take and give, heard the chisel's echo turning loss into language. You've seen how an emperor's sorrow could sculpt entire cities, how love when wielded by someone who ruled the world could still feel fragile, human, almost ordinary. So as you drift toward sleep, imagine the constellations above you shifting ever so slightly. That small cluster called Antinous winking faintly through the dark. It's not bright, but it's there, steady, patient, ancient. Proof that even when names fade from stone, some stories refuse to sink. Breathe in. Let the night fold around you like warm linen. The empire is quiet now. The river still flows. And somewhere, in the space between myth and memory, love still whispers your name.